of our board orientation back from April the 15th. We had to cut short the last time we did it, so we're back here on June the 10th to finish up our orientation session. And I'm really glad that Julie and Ray, you can be here with us. And what's interesting is we've had a few board meetings, so now it's old hand almost to having gone through it. But I really appreciate Ellen, you being here, and Mike and Ken having done all of this for a long time. It makes a difference. But it is an obligation of the association to make sure that all of our board of directors go through the orientation session. And we stopped at a point last time around, and forgive me, I'm going to flip through these very quickly to get to page 29 of 50 is where we were on our slides last.
Okay. And while you're doing that, may I ask how is everyone else doing this evening?
Very well, thank you very much.
Very well?
Yes.
Counselor, you're doing well?
Tremendously.
Julie, you're doing well? Mike?
Thank you very much for asking.
Right? Yeah, I think it's important. Yeah. Kind of sets the stage for a positive meeting.
It's true.
And how are you, Ellen?
I am doing extremely well.
Getting enough sleep?
Yeah. Although this is the third day I've been up here, right?
Been there with you.
But they've all been very productive. That's the important thing. Yes.
They actually have been.
Yeah.
So where we left off was we talked about the governing documents, that there are technically 4 pieces or 4 sets of our governing documents. The first is the deed, articles of incorporation, the bylaws, and then we have a whole body of resolutions that sit underneath those 3 documents that bring clarity or fill in the blanks in the other 3 documents. And the hierarchy of documents is the deed, articles, bylaws. That's how they're organized in small books. Julie's got one in front of her. That's actually the state corporation or the state Commonwealth of Virginia laws that she held up there. But the green book are our governing documents minus the resolutions, the policy, and administrative resolutions that we have.
Our Bible.
Right, the Bible. The Bible. So the association has lots of different categories of resolutions. The one that we're focused in on for the board is board operations and administration. So under that, there are 12 different resolutions covering a wide variety of topics that we're going to go into a little bit more in depth when we're here today. Ken and I are going to just tag team. He's probably going to interrupt and say, don't forget about this, or I'm just going to hand it over to him to respond to. Don't hesitate to ask questions. So a couple of these we went through last time, but I'm going to go back briefly to resolution number 1. That outlines all of the rules for having a meeting, for lack of a better way of putting it. That section covers the definition of meetings. So there are several different types of RA board meetings. One is the regular board meeting, that regular monthly that we have. There is the initial meeting of the board that we had when the elected officers and received the audit statement right after the election. There is a work session of the board, and there are special meetings of the board. The work session, you're not taking any action, but you're working together on a particular subject. We're going to have one on the 22nd. We're just inviting more people to that work session on the budget, and we're setting budget priorities. And then any special meeting. And as we've already had one, since you all have been elected, we had one on May 11th to announce the results of the Tetra referendum and also make a decision on how we wanted to move forward with Reston National Golf Course that we were going to be filing an appeal. So those are 4 different types of meetings that are important, and they're defined because they do count toward attendance and things like that. So when we're looking at who's available and when and meeting attendance, those are the 4 definitions of did you get to show up for that. We have an open meeting requirement. So anyone, like this session here, we're filming it, but anyone can come and sit in the audience and watch. This is an open meeting. All of our meetings are open unless we have to go into executive session. I'll go back to that in just a minute. You've seen what that's like in the recent meetings that you've attended, but I'll come back to that in a minute. Conduct of meetings, generally following Robert's Rules of Order. Not to the T. We try to make it a little bit more informal, but if we have to be very formal about something, if there's a major issue that comes up, we're going to rely on Robert's Rules of Order to help guide us through that. But we do have motions, seconds, following an agenda, tabling issues, discussion, right, and voting. So, length of meetings, we have a rule in this resolution that says we're not going to go past 11 o'clock at night. If we do go past 11 o'clock at night, if we choose to, it has to be by vote of the board. Yes, we want to go longer. As we said before, our interest is, trying to keep the meeting as concise as possible. We'll talk a little bit more kind of about what meeting agendas look like and what we've done over the past year to make the meetings go more smoothly. But we don't really want directors making decisions after that length of time. If you're starting at 6 o'clock and you've gone till 11, you've already been here for 5 hours, on camera for 5 hours. Going past that, you're going into the midnight hours. Everybody's been at work all day long, and then you start not thinking as clearly as you can. So sometimes it's okay to say, nope, we're going to pluck that off and take that to another meeting if we need to, and we've done that in the past. Ellen.
So, yeah, that was going to be my question. If the directors refuse to go beyond the 11 o'clock, we would continue that for a meeting for another time? Is that how we would resolve that issue?
We can, absolutely. Yeah. The board can say, let's take this up at the next regular meeting, or we can call a special meeting to take it up if you want to.
Or you simply can adjourn.
And just adjourn and not take it up. And just
Has that ever occurred, to your knowledge?
No, it hasn't. It hasn't. Action without a meeting, unanimous consent. Unanimous consent, I don't know if we've done it with you guys yet. Have we done it with this body?
Not this body.
Not this body yet.
Prior bodies, a lot.
Last year we did it a couple of times. Emergency situation comes up. Perfect example is North Shore Pool. When we were getting ready, when we were doing the construction on the new entrance, we uncovered something that we didn't really know was there, nor at the time when we had Miss Utility come out, realized it was there, and that were some Dominion lines. So we had to stop work. We had to provide Dominion an easement to go and relocate their lines for us to complete the project. To grant an easement is an action of the board. That's not something that I can do. Only the board can grant easement across the association's common area. We wanted to keep the project moving forward because it might have meant the pool not opening on time or really late in the season. We've got quite a few people in that area who utilize that pool. So we used unanimous consent through an electronic means. We framed the issue, put the materials together, and request that the board of directors send their approval. If someone says no, voting ends right there, the issue dies. Everyone has to say yes, and something like that. And we have had occasions where somebody has said, no, I'm not comfortable with that. And that's okay. I don't have enough information, or whatever the case might be.
What if you don't reach everybody?
Then there is not necessarily a time limitation. And it's before we send something out, we're going to think about who's available, who's here, who can we reach by phone. Hey, sent you an email, can you go and take a look at it? If for any reason somebody is out of the country, we'll pause and say, okay, we can't do this right now. Or what we can do instead, call a special meeting. Because you don't need unanimous vote at that point. You just need a majority vote. And as we're going to talk about just one down, use of technology. All we need to have are 2 board directors in the room, space available in a room, so if anybody who wants to come and listen to what's going on, they can. Everybody else could participate by phone if they wanted to. As long as I had a quorum of the board, 9 of you, I need 5 of 9 in the room. Or 5 of 9 participating. And the room can be on the phone in the room.
And it's important to remember that, in essence, what a board meeting is a business meeting. And so why you have the necessity of having members in the room or on the telephone, and why action without a meeting is only seldom taken, is because of the discussion that goes on about an issue, so that the issues can be dealt with, talked about, fully fleshed out, because ultimately it's the whole board that needs to make the fully informed decision. And by doing the discussion, by getting your point of view out, by getting all the information on the table, then you can do that. Whereas if you didn't have that discussion, you didn't have the information, you couldn't make a fully informed decision necessarily. And so the action without a meeting is a special occurrence. It's not something that's utilized often or frequently, because if it does, then we're running the meetings wrong.
Exactly. Yeah, the intent is for everybody to get together and have face-to-face conversation about things. There were a couple of opportunities, and actually, you know, again, having a little distance between the first session that we had and this one, you know, Julie pointed something out that was very good when we were talking about kind of the Tetra materials, when we were trying to put information out, you know, get newsletters out and things like that. We were all like, okay, whose name wants to be here? Is the letter okay? And all of this. And she said, why couldn't we have had a special meeting? She goes, maybe not everybody could have participated, but at least a majority of the board could have participated, you know, during a phone call with a couple of board directors in the room, hashed it out, gotten a majority vote and moved on a couple things, as opposed to trying to electronically make sure everybody was comfortable. Point very well taken. And sometimes you've been in a position so long that you forget that that's an option. So I really valued the fact that Julie said, hey, what am I, duh,
Yeah.
of course. That was good. So that's what a special meeting can be called for. We do have some notice requirements, though, and that is, there's a certain number of days that we have to give. It's not going to be in the deed book, but in this resolution, do me a favor and look that up. Is it at least 2 days? 2 days.
For a special meeting of the Board of Directors.
Special meeting, 2 days, at least to give you notice that you can participate.
Can you call a special meeting and then, like in that circumstance, could we have anticipated that we might need one, called for it, and then found that the topic no longer needed to be addressed?
Cancel it, sure. Yeah.
Because I know we were working very fast, and
Right.
But we did, I think, know that there was probably enough things going on with Tetra that perhaps a checkpoint could have been placed on the calendar via special meeting.
You can also call a meeting for that very purpose and then have everybody waive notice of the meeting, so you wouldn't have to meet the 2-day requirement. We just had a very interesting situation occur with one of our other clients where there was an immediate situation. They couldn't get unanimous consent because one of the board members was outside of the country. So they wanted to hold a meeting the next day. Their documents required a 3-day notice requirement, but all the board members waived the notice, including the one who was out of the country. They got a written document from him saying that he would waive notice of any meeting. Alternatively, where we had the pushback was because all meetings, except for those portions of open meetings held in executive session, are supposed to be open meetings. So we had homeowners who were on the opposite side of where they thought the board was going to go, complaining about the fact that they had notice. But at the same time, the notice went out to the board about this special meeting. They got notice as well in accordance with the state statute. So,
which is what we do. So if we were to have called notice or called for a meeting in that case, we would have put it up on the website. I would have sent it to you all, and then we have a whole RA distribution list that we would have sent it. Local media, things like that would have been notified of that. So there are ways to get business done in the organization aside from a regular meeting. On that special meeting, we do unanimous consent. Use of technology, which is great. We've had several directors, even one of them who called in from Cuba on one of his meetings to participate. So that is a great tool to use if you're going to be out of town, but you really want to participate in the meeting. You are counted toward quorum, even though you're not physically here, but you're here and you can cast votes. Executive session. There are only certain times when we can call and go into an executive session. We've done it a couple of times already. Ellen is very good about explaining what executive session is, what we're allowed to do by law, exactly why we're going into executive session, and what we plan to do when we come out. We want to be as informative as we can. We had a lot of complaints over the years by members saying, you're not telling us what's going on. So last year we were very focused on making sure we let people know what we were doing. And Ken is very good about making sure that we talk about things in executive session that we should be and not things that should be in open session. John McBride is the same way. You know, all of what you've heard over the past couple of months from him is open session for a reason. The members need to know what's going on with our land use items and have an understanding. It's not just for the board's benefit, but it's for our members' benefit as well. So contractual, legal matters, personnel matters. Personnel, as I've said before, is not just staff related. It can also be a volunteer related, where you need to discuss an issue with a volunteer. One of you might want to talk about an issue amongst yourselves quietly and off camera, whatever that might be, or you might have somebody on a committee that we need direction on. We're having trouble with that, or just as you did at one of your last meetings, you talked about CEO performance review. That's why you would do that in executive session.
So could it be director related, or would that have to go to the governance before it was discussed?
No.
One of the main uses of that is when there's a board that is in trouble, either an individual member or a faction on a board. So it's a personnel issue. So you can meet in executive session to discuss issues involving the board and the relationship with one another. But one of the things we'll get to a little bit later is the issue of credibility, and how important it is for a board to maintain a level of credibility to outside third parties, including their members. And so it is of utmost concern not when you're discussing an issue, because when you're discussing an issue, you go at it and you present your point of view, whether it's in the majority, minority, or what. But the reality is, once a decision is made, that's the decision of the board, and having the credibility of the board behind that decision is critical, because that's the appearance that you're giving off to the members of the community as well as third parties across the board.
So with Tetra, again, lots of executive session. We were in the middle of negotiations on the contract and all of that, and we had the opportunity to talk about what bank we wanted to go with, making sure that you saw that we were negotiating that. But as soon as you had given me direction, we came out of executive session, took the vote, made sure that information was available to the members. So we're very much committed to doing that, to making sure that the members see what's going on. Also with legal, it could be just asking for counsel's advice on how to do something that is sensitive in nature. Legal cases or pending litigation, how do we prepare ourselves for that? And it's imperative that counsel be able to have the conversation, talk to you about strategy, and that information about strategy stay in the room, especially if we're going to court on a case, which may be the case with Reston National. John may be coming in to have a conversation with you to say, here's where we are and here's the game plan, but he's not going to do that in open session, because we don't want anybody else to know what the game plan is, right? Right. We want to be successful. So that'll be in closed session, and it will be probably more conversational. It's not necessarily going to be a bunch of papers in front of you. And his expectation, as is Ken's, because there are times where we have litigation that comes for us in a different context that counsel will want to talk with you about, and they want to keep it in the room.
While we're on that point, it's important to remember that you as a board are the executive organ of the association, which I am responsible for reporting to. And the key is, when there is an issue and you're looking for a legal opinion, I'm not going to necessarily give that opinion in open session because it's an attorney-client privilege. If you guys want to waive that privilege, that's a board decision, board vote. You can waive it, and then we can discuss that in an open session. But generally speaking, I'm not going to give advice to the board unless we're in executive session for the purposes of letting you know what the opinion is and then letting you evaluate that and whether or not you want to bring that back in open session and have that disclosed.
Mostly on legal matters. How do we handle XYZ when we're sitting at the table? You've seen Ken, kind of chime in and say, here's what you might want to think about doing. He's not going to do that often because he does believe in letting you work it out. He doesn't want to interrupt or direct that process, and nor do I, because it's up to, that's what you all are here for. But if he or I feel that you're going down a path that you might want to stay away from, we're certainly going to, chime in and give a recommendation on something. But it's entirely up to you. And he's very good at going, hold on, wait a minute, back the truck up a little bit. So which I value. I've valued for a number of years his ability to also find ways to get you where you want to go, which is really important. He's not a yes man. He's going to often say no. Because it could jeopardize the organization, and he doesn't want you to go there. So that's fair, I think, and I value that very much. So, executive session recording of meetings, we do it all the time. As you can see, we make sure it's available to our members. There was, back 15 years ago, there was something that was put in a legislative bill because there were some other people in the Commonwealth of Virginia who were a part of homeowners associations and were upset because their boards of directors were having secret meetings and what's going on and all of this. So the legislature passed a bill that said, yes, members can record a meeting. So we can have somebody sitting in the audience and, videotaping, gosh, now that things have changed over time, having microphones and all of that. So they can make their own recording. But we do have the ability to make a rule about recordings. And at the time, the last thing you want is somebody put that microphone right up in your face when you're trying to, it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We're going to give you some rules about what you can and can't do. We go ahead and do it because we think it's the right thing to do. Last year I said, let's YouTube and let's put these on the website so people can see it. Along with the meeting minutes, which are the official record of the actions taken by the board and the meeting agenda packet. Anything to add on that?
We actually had a member of an association who was already brought a suit against the association, show up at a meeting and not showed up at a meeting. We were giving a seminar, one of our legal seminars for community associations. He showed up at that seminar with a tape recorder in his pocket, was going to ask questions, and we found out about it. You need to be careful when you're speaking with anybody. Remember, in Virginia, the rule is that if you're on the phone and one person gives consent, then that phone conversation can be recorded. Well, if you get a call from somebody, that person who's calling can give consent to having the thing recorded, whether you're aware of it or not, and record your entire conversation. It's not like Maryland.
And they don't have to disclose that they're recording.
So be aware of that.
Let's see, agenda packets. Agenda pack is the whole thing. We make that as soon as it's made available to you. Sabrina puts it right on the website so that it's available for everyone to see. All the materials that you have,
The public has.
the public has. Well, the world, technically, right? Everybody's got it. We also have a laundry list of people over the time who've raised their hands and said, I want a copy of the packet. Whenever you send something out to the board for an open meeting, I want a copy of that. So we've got about 100 people that we send out a packet to regularly. It includes the media. So packets, the reason why you see some of our local media on a story is because they've read the agenda packet, they've come up with their own story on it, and they posted it. because they have access to the materials. So it is what it is, but we are required to send it out to those who ask. So we do. Long list, send it out. When you get it, they get it as well, as do all of our committee chairs. They get packets as well. DRB, covenants, elections, EAC, transportation, pedestrian and bicycling, 55 plus, Parks and Rec, everybody gets a packet.
Is it just the chairs of the committees or the members?
Just the chairs. They didn't ask for it, we just push it anyway, automatic, so that they do have that. But I do have people who are on committees who made a request to be on that bigger laundry list.
So members who request hard copies, do we charge them any administrative costs for that, or
We
is that part of our goodwill?
Well, I would say good. Yeah, I mean, we do it electronically. We haven't had anybody ask for a
So
hard copy.
you don't have to hard, okay.
But we do make copies of the agenda available at the beginning of the board meeting so people can take them. And sometimes actual copies of items that we know are going to be of interest. We don't want to, I mean, because some of those packets are over 100 pages long. That would be
Kind of expensive,
not,
yeah.
it's kind of would be waste of time and money.
And to shred it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
About 3 years that
Right.
occupied a
Right.
good portion of mine.
Right, before we went to the iPads, right.
Yeah.
So if there is, good example would be Tetra referendum question and fact sheet, where we made sure hard copies were available. Because some of that stuff was coming out right up at the wire when we were finishing. We wanted to make sure whoever attended got it. We made sure it was up on the website right away too. So we try to make sure that information is available to everybody. Member comments, we always allow for member comments at our meetings, including committee meetings. We usually do that at the beginning of a meeting, unless there's an item and we want to, there's a special item of some sort that we want to make sure we get member comments in. We try to do all of that, though, at the beginning of the meeting. Like public hearings, you've noticed that we'll have a separate member comments, but we'll have something different for a public hearing on that. There are occasions where I've seen over the years where an item has come up, a hand goes up in the audience. It's at the discretion of the board president at the time whether or not they want to let that individual speak. Because technically, after the member comments are done, it's all about you. It's all about the board having a conversation with each other about those agenda items. The audience is there, but it's really for your information and for your time to have a discussion with each other about the items.
Can make the board meetings very chaotic if we're trying to have a discussion amongst the members of the board and then separately a member of the board attempts to engage the audience or vice versa.
Right.
The discussion really is amongst us representing the members, and providing an open space for the members to comment allows them to share whatever is on their mind at the time. And it's really incumbent on us when the agenda is released a week in advance at least, and generally we have a pretty good sense of any of the issues. If we want to get comments from members, we should really be going out in advance of the meeting so that we're prepared.
Absolutely.
And inviting them too to come.
Absolutely.
Something new that we did last year is enable members to register to speak through the website. They don't have to necessarily come and make sure they get their name on. They can just send an email. Sabrina gets that, or go onto the website, register. They're put in a queue. First come, first serve. Then people who come can also register that way.
I could see, though, that there may be some topics that we end up being presented with and being discussed, that there's new information that comes to light as part of those presentations and discussions, and that it might make sense then for the president to say, let's pause a moment, there's a number of interested people here, would anyone like to make a comment before we resume our discussions and voting.
Ken used that a couple of times last year. Ellen hasn't had the opportunity to use it yet, but yet it was just, I can't remember what it was, but I remember you made a decision. You were like, you know what, let's just go ahead and open and allow address that.
Was it relax?
Well, I think
Ethics.
a little bit of
Ethics committee.
And something
There's
else.
a second opportunity.
Ethics and relax.
And relax, yeah,
very much.
relax, yeah.
And I think Tall Oaks, the other meeting, kind of started to go that way, and you did graciously
Yeah,
allow some
exactly,
people
yeah.
to, because they were clearly.
Yeah.
Well,
But,
information was being presented that they didn't hear about before.
Right,
They were,
yeah.
It was new information that
Right.
that changed some of their perspectives, yeah. And I think that was key to allow them.
and I think it's always important to treat everyone with respect. I mean,
Right.
and because we want them to be respectful of us as well. So I think it's a great
They spent their time to come.
Exactly, they spend their time coming, right?
But we do need to be mindful of the time, right?
Absolutely.
This is when we're kind of like, okay, we need to extend the meeting past 11 o'clock. So that's
It's not only the time, though. It's the fact that sometimes allowing that kind of interruption can lead to swaying that is improper, or an attempt to sway. Because what you need to keep in mind is that everyone out there, all of the members who come and listen, don't have the same responsibility or liability that you all have.
Right.
And that stuff, reopening things, can later, especially since you're recording, can come back to haunt you if it looks like what was said by the members swayed you, as opposed to you making an independent decision. And because you all are here to make the independent
Absolutely.
decision.
Yeah.
Right.
But I understand what you're saying
Yeah.
about new information.
Yeah.
That kind
But in the same vein, if our goal is to also be transparent and open and encompassing, like we're trying to get more of the community involved,
Absolutely.
then I don't, I think that that's a judgment call that you have to
It
place.
is.
And I think it was,
Indiscretion.
I wasn't there for the ethics one, but I think in the Tall Oaks situation, it probably was a good way, because we weren't ending up changing
Right.
our votes.
Right.
It was
It's
simply
only
a
discussion,
discussion.
not an action, yeah.
Yeah, and helping them deal with what was happening in their backyard.
Right.
something that happened last year, and it was kind of it was a gut feeling with Ken, two Kens.
Yeah.
The good Ken and the bad Ken.
That's
and
Ben.
I on
Ken
the
and
spot.
Ben.
Ken and Ben.
Ken and Ben, right, on the
Thank
spot.
you, as if that hasn't gone far enough.
And it was during RELAC discussions, and it was clear to us that, and it was really through a board planning committee, when we were beginning to get a lot of people showing up to that, we were looking at that, we were like, you know what, we need a special work session. This is not an RA board meeting, this is a work session to discuss it, or a special meeting just on this topic. And I think over time, we preened our ears up enough to know, okay, this is a hot one. We're going to need more time. Or this means a lot to the community. We're going to need more time. We don't
More
want
of a
any-
public
Yeah, the
discussion,
public.
a public hearing.
Right. And that's where agenda setting, really comes into play with the Board Operations Committee now of, okay, we've got an important item. We know that there's a large number of people in the community who want to see this, so let's clear the decks, or let's set up a special meeting just to take it up, and not just give it a few minutes. So yeah, there are a number of ways that over time, we try to be agile and learn how to handle those.
Now we have, was it a 2-minute or
3 minutes.
3 minutes?
3 minutes and 5 minutes for organizations.
We don't have any similar ones for board members, do we?
We do not. We do not, and that's something that you all can decide on amongst yourselves, if you want to limit your discussion with each other.
Good governance
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
good governance
that's a governance, right.
conversation. And you've got 3 governance people in the room who can think about that. One of the things that we tried to do over time, it was very interesting, because Ken was president for 3 years, that he and I noticed is that sometimes we would have board directors completely hijack a meeting. I mean, and he was like, whoa, wait a minute. And somebody would just, and take it off into another direction. So we're like, okay, what can we do? And our board source contact said, why don't you try going around the room
yeah.
and giving everybody the opportunity to be heard.
Right.
And then because sometimes before we were doing that, there were people who never got a chance to speak because somebody would
Absolutely.
take that microphone and never give it back.
Right.
So it was a way to make sure everybody had an opportunity to say something. And then we're doing that now, and it's like everybody's had a chance to say something, and then depending on the topic, I mean, you've seen sometimes it's like, okay, yep, no, I'm good, or somebody's got something, and then somebody kind of go around the table, it's like, you know what, I've got something to add to that.
Right, yeah.
Or, gee, you changed my mind on
Or
it.
you brought a
Yeah.
thought to mind that I'd like to
And that's
speak
been
on.
helpful, but, if you want to, that's a kind of mental note I've already put in my head about kind of how you run a meeting. If you want to limit each other's conversation, or whether you want to keep the rich conversation going.
Or we could also choose at that moment, say, to pass, depending where Ellen's.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
You could say, come back to me, I'm still
Process.
formulating my thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
The purpose of going around is to get a diversity of views so that we can make a good decision. And, this is a business meeting, and we got a lot of important business to do. And so, if you made a comment and it was precisely what I was going to say, why do I need to repeat it as well?
Right.
Yeah.
But you may have made a comment after I commented that I want to take issue with.
Absolutely.
or-
Then that enriches the conversation and is worth hearing.
So the go-round isn't simply once and done.
It
No.
doesn't have to be. It
Say,
doesn't have to
I
be.
want
not, yeah.
to, I want to speak more.
It doesn't have to be.
That person has the gavel.
Right.
Right, and it's and constantly, Ken and I are constantly looking at kind of body language and as is Ellen, or and Ken was too. It's like I can tell so and so's got one. You might want to
Right.
So you might see me leaning over to Ellen and saying,
Yeah.
somebody might want to grab that individual one more time because it's clear that they've got something else to add to it.
You already know my processing look.
I know, I do. I've got Julie now. I'll never forget that first one. I was like, you've got a question. I do not. But that's okay. That's what it's about. So, manner of acting, I mentioned 5 of 9. Director attendance at meetings. So, simple rule. If you can't be here, let us know. Me, Ellen, Sabrina, Mike, whatever, but let one of us know so that, we're keeping quorum count. And hey, I can't be there, whatever the case might be. Family things, you're not feeling good.
Oh, yeah.
You're not feeling good, you've got a trip, you've got a business meeting, whatever it is. Just let us know. Or, hey, I can be there, but I want to participate by phone. Just give us enough time so that Sabrina can get, we call it lovingly internally, the bathroom set up so that you can participate on that. But if we don't hear from you 3 times in a row for one of those 4 meetings, it's like, okay, we got a board meeting, we got a work session, we special meeting, and just, Mike's not here. Where did he go? And we don't hear from you at all. First thing that's going to happen is Ellen or myself are going to, hey, Mike, are you okay?
Absolutely.
All right? Yeah, work has been busy. I'll be back. Okay, good. We hear from you again, or we don't hear from you again, it's going to be like, ooh, wait, hey, do you have time to do this? And then it's an opportunity for you to say, yep, I'm okay, I'm good, I'll be there, sorry, forgive me, I need a little break, and it's an excused absence type of thing. But if we don't get any response at all, then we're going to kick into the process of removal from the board of directors. We do have a whole process for that. On my time, we've only had to do that once. And we send out a certified letter, give the individual every opportunity to respond to us, give them an opportunity to be heard. You can hold a public hearing to enable that person to state how they, why they should or shouldn't stay on, and then the board votes whether or not to remove them. So that is the only way, aside from he'll give the chapter and verse for director removal. There are two different ways in documents that directors can be removed. One is by the individuals who elected them to office by petition, right?
And the other is
And vote.
referendum.
And the other is by
Referendum.
felony.
Here we go.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's removal, which is by the members, and then there's effective resignation.
Okay.
And so it's basically the same result, but under your documents, which is really a unique situation, you don't see this in many documents. There are those that have it, but you don't see it in many. The 3 absences are deemed to be resigned without sufficient cause as defined. So if you've
So
got
Ken,
3...
that's unexcused absence, right?
That didn't
No.
hear from you?
Didn't hear from you.
Not just unexcused, it's period. Any absence from 3 consecutive meetings
Okay.
without sufficient cause
Okay.
as defined by any resolution by the board of directors. Now, obviously,
Which is defined in this
the
resolution.
excuse.
Right.
The answer is that as long as you call in and everybody knows what's happening, I think that's not a problem. But it's when you're not paying attention to your responsibilities as director, it's a resignation. It's deemed by the documents to be a resignation, and you will no longer be on the board. So,
But we do, we want to be fair, so we clarified, we added to what's in the deed.
and it is
To-
3
to put-
consecutive meetings, by the way.
Right, 3 consecutive.
Important to realize that.
And we put information, in this resolution to say what that means, what the board can do in order to remedy that. Our goal is to give everybody an opportunity to succeed and kind of come back to us and tell us what's going on. So that, and give Miss Julie the page.
No, I'm looking at it. There's
Section.
also, well, there's also failure to disclose a conflict of interest, right?
Right.
I'm looking for the bylaws section.
Fiduciary duty or any crime of moral turpitude.
I love that.
Turpitude.
Moral turpitude, I love that too.
To remind you.
That's a winner.
Time.
And there's also the section in the Articles of Incorporation as well,
For,
for
I'm looking for
director
bylaws.
removal or director.
right, for
I know.
removal.
So nothing in the bylaws is
5.2.
going to talk, I don't think the bylaws talk about it. It should be the deed, right, for director removal?
Yeah, primarily the
Yeah.
deed.
Removal from an office, removal for committees, but director removal is going to be in the deed and in the Articles of Incorporation. Deed is in the first section, which I believe you're in. You're in the deed right now. Yep. And the bylaws are at the
17.
very back of the book.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that section that you're on that last page of the bylaws. Are you chilly?
Cold.
Okay. I mean, not chilly, but cold. Okay. So that is attendance at a meeting. Took a while to get through this slide. There's a lot in it. Even though there's a bunch of bullets there, there's a lot going on in that slide. Number 2, election of officers. I do not need to go over this in any great depth. You've gotten the opportunity to see it firsthand. 4 officers. President, Vice President, Secretary, Treasurer. Sabrina is appointed as an Assistant Secretary. Here's a quiz. Which 2 officer positions have to be elected directors? Have to be elected directors.
We mean president, and
And the vice president.
And vice president. Secretary and treasurer do not have to be elected directors. Like John Higgins was not an elected director. He was just a member of the association in
right.
good standing. Good standing means he's paid his assessment, he doesn't have any covenants violations. Same thing could happen with a secretary. You could have somebody as an officer in the role of secretary who is not an elected director. Right now, everybody who sits in those officer positions are elected directors. And that's not bad. That's good. That's not a bad thing. I think it's actually kind of good that we've gone in that direction.
Unusual that there was only one person in each slot that was up. There was no voting for anything.
And I I think what you're going to find over the course of the year, when you think about those roles, who is comfortable, in being in a leadership role, and as Ellen is learning, it's a daily job. It is and as Ken knows, I think it easily
story.
Yeah, it's one of those, who's comfortable in front of a camera, who's comfortable getting up and doing public speaking, who's comfortable, who's got the time. And I think that over the course of the year, what you're going to see, and I'm guessing that the governance committee may be coming up with, hey, are you interested in a leadership position? Okay, which one? I believe that that's one of the things that's going to be important.
Mentoring element, right?
It's kind of mentoring. Hey, I'm interested in a leadership position. Which one? Let's get you trained and get you in the pipeline. What I have seen a couple of times over the course of the years is somebody gets elected and immediately and never having served on the board before, and immediately gets into one of the top roles. And it's what a learning curve there is. Not having had at least the benefit of sitting at least 6 months or a year in this to kind of learn everything, and then, okay, I'm ready now to take that on. My advice, doesn't matter really what I say, but my advice is you don't really want anybody in one of those 4 positions unless they've kind of seen what you're doing, at least for a few months, to understand what the Reston Association is all about and how the board operates. Doesn't mean that they haven't come from a background who sat on a board before and can't do it. But there's as you probably, the 2 of you especially, have learned in just 3 months, right? You've almost 2 months that you've been on the board, right? April, May, right? 2 months. You've only been here 6 months.
6 months.
Or 60 days, right? Whatever it is. That tells you, okay.
Yeah, it's a long day.
There's a lot that goes on around here. And kind of not every member knows kind of the inner workings and how things go. There's a lot to know when you're sitting in those slots.
And also someone who is familiar with the community and knows the leaders of the community, someone who has a relationship with the leaders of the community. I think it's extremely important. Yeah.
That helps.
Yeah.
Alternatively, there's nothing that prescribes or prohibits there to be more than one nominee for an officer's position.
Absolutely.
Can I get back to my initial question?
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Is it unusual? In past years, have there been competitions for these slots, or was this typical of what we see every year?
There's been competition.
Sometimes.
And that's why we have secret voting. Sometimes. But there has been competition.
Is it usually for the top spots, or? Okay.
Yeah.
It's a separate conversation, but oh yeah.
No, that is. And that's one of the reasons, one of the things that you heard during those special sessions that we had, in the community about, who's going to be, electing the officers. I personally would love to see the board have an open conversation about its leadership prior to the month of April. Who's interested?
Yeah.
Why? Okay, if you're interested, let's tell you what comes along with that. What had been happening in the past was a lot of stuff behind the scenes. And you had this uncomfortable competition going into your very first meeting. And you had this, you had all of this.
Yin and the yang.
There were agendas behind it and all of this. And so you had a good 3-month period after the board was seated where Ken and I are sitting there looking at a board divided.
Wow.
And it took 3 months to get over that. And then by the time everybody got over that, the process starts again.
Isn't there a way to vent people a month or 2 beforehand so we all know who wants it? And
yes, we will. I think that it is imperative that the governance committee come up with a process that's fair and equitable for all 9 of you, and that you all say, this is how we want to go forward, so it's not this crazy, uncomfortable, so that's the only.
In the normal sequence of new people coming on terms, ending whatever, I know this past time, there were a couple special appointments for one-year terms to fill in, which I don't think is the norm.
No.
So this time, I think we had more people running,
Right.
perhaps, than normal.
Right.
So is it typically just two positions?
For
In the
sure.
sequencing, you know, is it typically
three.
one
It's
district?
always three positions. It's either going to be 2 district and 1 at large, or 2 at large and 1 district, or the apartment owners, but that's not something that all the owners, that's just
Vote
the
on,
apartment
right.
owners. So it's usually 3. We had 4 this time.
Right.
Which was unusual.
But we also had, I think there were at least 2 people who were in one-year
Yes.
appointments.
Yes.
Absolutely,
Too,
yeah.
that, so when I think of newness,
Yeah.
you know, and Ray and I are new at this point, but, you know, you add their newness plus our newness.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I think that the plans in the governing committee to talk about how we encourage people to participate
Yep.
and get involved in
Absolutely.
committees and begin to think about how they grow.
Exactly.
And can contribute
And
from that
later this
point.
evening, I'm going to show you, you've actually got next to you is kind of what came out of, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Pause that. That's a good idea, because that is exactly something that came out of something, a board source session that we had about mentoring, getting people involved in certain things so that they can identify what they're most interested in and doing it. But secret ballot is, sorry.
I think it's, you know, we're here to serve the community.
Right.
We're about serving the community. The faster we can bring board members up to speed and we can have a constructive conversation about the many issues, the better off we are.
Right.
That's not always been the way it's been on the board. And, you know, we're here to serve the organization and the community.
So definitely, you know, we're in a mode right now of trying to make it clearer, more transparent,
Absolutely.
you know, more of a corporate board style, but also educational at the same time. So it's, you know, you raised your hand for a reason. And as I said before, I'm honored that I've got this many people who want to volunteer this number of hours to make our community the best it can be. Community management is not easy, and that's what you're doing.
It's not
And making sure you do
easy.
it right is important.
And I'm increasingly becoming intolerant of, you know, the arguments that we're not transparent, we've got secret agendas or otherwise. And, you know, you're relatively new on the board. If you see things that we can do as an organization that make us more accessible,
Absolutely.
then
I think just in some of the discussions we've had about thinking about the messages we send out, the press releases, whatever,
Right.
that if we read them, you try to have somebody who doesn't know anything. Think of it as you don't know anything
Right.
and explaining the logic, you
Absolutely
know.
right.
right.
Do we always have the announcement of who gets elected the same night as the first board? I mean, it was like the day before, right, the annual
Right, the day
election, and then the board meeting immediately followed.
Yes.
Is that always that?
It is.
The next
That's the
day?
way our documents are set up. And the reason for that is you don't want to put a lot of time in between
Right.
the election of the board and the officers. Because if I've got several officers that have rolled off and they're gone, they cannot.
Right, but in the same vein, it does not allow much time, because you don't know who's going to be elected, to discuss about the new officer slate and who might or might not be in
And
it.
that's,
Because somebody might have come back on the
Knew you
board.
were gonna win.
No, I meant in terms of the officers.
On your chain.
I know, and I'm refusing to.
but that's why I think a process ahead of time that the governance committee
Right.
can think about, so that it is known, you know, what the thought is about who's interested in coming up. I've seen practices in other organizations that I volunteer for, that there is, you know, you put in a slate of officers and from Leadership Fairfax, I'm going to use that as an example. Chambers the same way. Secretary, vice, chair, and you know that secretary becomes vice becomes, chair, then you have an immediate past chair. And so and those three individuals get the opportunity as they go through to learn about the organization. So when they're sitting in that seat, they're ready to go. Is that the right model for us? I don't know. That's up for the board to decide and make a policy resolution. Here's how we're going to do it. And I encourage the board to consider that, because the divisiveness that I have seen rip a board apart and prevent it from doing its job because of the political maneuvering has really hampered the forward movement of the organization.
For instance.
For instance.
Of divisiveness, example, really split, bad case. An example of a bad case.
Oh boy, Ken and I can tell you that over time, we've had people be so angry about officer elections that after I've had board directors don't sit me next to so-and-so because they're mean.
Right.
So I've had to rearrange the deck.
I only asked to move because I couldn't see past you.
There was a time, and this was even before I came to Reston, there was a time when Reston had an incredibly bad reputation out in the marketplace because of the diversity or divisiveness on the board of directors. So that it was not only internal, it was portrayed externally.
Was it a matter of personality clashes?
Partly factions, and it was also agendas.
And not that you all should be thinking alike, because you don't want that. You want the diversity of opinions. But the level of respect that wasn't shown to each other was astounding.
The tolerance and respect for people's different opinions.
That or just
you have to come to consensus.
Right.
And that's what we're about.
Right. And even though you might not agree with the outcome of a vote, you still understood, I've got to, advance the position. This is where we're going. I've got to stand behind it. And so what we've seen in the past, more recent past, during a board election, directors taking a position as to who should be elected and sending out emails to a mass group. Here's who I think you should vote for. Here's who you shouldn't and why. And I think to myself, I'm like, it's okay to have your own personal opinion. Everybody does. I'm a member. I vote, so I've got my opinion when I vote. But I am not going to share that. Well, that'd be really dumb, right? If I went out to everybody and said, here's who I think and why.
And then they don't get elected.
Right, and that person that I said vote against wins. Ooh, boy, have I put myself in a really awkward position. I would never do that, but if I were sitting on the board, what have I done? I've already created an issue. And now I can't even sit two people next to each other. Or will they be looking at each other? And I'm not kidding. Ken and I had to deal with issues in the past where we're really contemplating, okay, I don't want to sit so-and-so and so-and-so because they'll see each other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit that one here, that one there, with someone in between. Ken's saying that.
So when we've got important things to do, and you spend your time on board meetings dealing with those kinds of issues, you can't make good decisions for the community.
And you've all come here for a reason. You want to do what's right for the community. If you have a leadership interest, let's create a process and a system that enables that to happen. In an equitable and fair way where you've got an open conversation. Look how great the conversation went. First time we've ever done it on committee assignments. Open,
Absolutely.
Everybody
Yeah.
gave their preferences, right? And this was something that Ken and Ellen and Mike and I, after we had done it a year prior, where there was a lot of animosity. Why did you pick so-and-so? And I was like, let's
Yeah.
change this. Let's make it an open, let's have a discussion about it. Nobody was trying to hide anything for everybody. It was just there were only so many slots, and we have to fill them. And I saw negotiating going around the table, and nobody left unhappy.
And it was good you gave the advance so that people could think about it, they could go back, and that was part of what I did. I thought about, well, what did people say to me when I was campaigning? What was important? So those are the committees I ought to sign up for.
Yeah. So think food for thought for the governance committee, same concept of getting that out there and having the conversation with your sitting board. So when April timeframe comes around, everybody knows who's, and it's not a mystery,
We probably
right?
ought to include that on the discussions with the people who are running for election, when you have that campaign election kind of,
Yep.
get smart about running. It might be good for them to say, look, begin thinking about
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Because this is the process we will use. So if you're elected, be prepared
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
Absolutely. But anyway, I didn't mean to digress.
sorry.
Most important thing about this, voting by secret ballot, for a reason in case there is a contested, you don't want to know who voted against you. It's uncomfortable. So even though you could guess, but it's still uncomfortable. And that's the only time we do anything by secret ballot. Everything else is
Fair.
okay. Hearings. Timing on hearings. The hearings that you've seen us have, you've had two great examples over the past several months. Well, three. Actually, we've had lots over the past several months. Tetra, public hearing. When we're going to do a public hearing whenever the board of directors is looking and considering the question to be asked by the members, as well as the materials accompanying that question. So once the draft question and fact sheet behind that has been prepared, it will be published. We will hold a public hearing. We will get member feedback. Hopefully we'll get feedback that we can use to make adjustments to the way the question is worded. And the question for Tetra changed slightly every time we met, just to make sure that we were, honing in on the right thing. Same thing with the fact sheet. What's missing? What do we not need? What do we need to make sure we include? So we usually hold 2 hearings. You don't have to hold 2 hearings. You have to hold at least 1 hearing on something like that. We chose to hold 2 for things because we want to give plenty of opportunity for people to weigh in, our members to weigh in. We're required to publish notice of the hearing at least 2 weeks in advance of the hearing date. We put that on our website, we put it out at RA News, we send it out to the news media, print as well as electronic, more electronic these days, because that's pretty much the way that goes, but it's local media. Sometimes we'll even go so far, depending on what you all want to do, depending on what it is, to send out a direct mailing. Last time we did direct mailing for a hearing was with the air conditioning unit covenant referendum. It affected a finite group of people. We wanted to make sure they had an opportunity before that referendum ballot went out to weigh in. We got some very good feedback and questions that council and I were working on up to the last minute because of the comments that came from those members. We really honed the information that went out. Public hearing required for Comstock. That's not a member vote, but it says in our governing documents, there is a notice requirement on the addition to property section that says we have to hold a public hearing. We can hold 1 public hearing and you can vote that night. Again, I've learned over time, give a lot of time. Give time for people. Don't, unless there's an emergency situation, I'm always going to take the time to really map out the process before you take a vote, and I'm always going to build in at least 60 days time for public hearing. Something that we started last year with Sabrina's help is making sure that members can submit their comments to us as well. So if somebody doesn't physically come and say something at the podium, they can at least send in their comments. And what we've done is take those comments that have been submitted, give them to the board president during the hearing, and after the verbal comments, have the board president read through those. So that way, we can show, hey, we got more than two, there might be only 2 people who show up, but maybe we got more written comments, that were submitted through the website, which is good. So that's been very helpful. I think, Ken's really got to be the one that experienced that the most. It's kind of a different way to do that. So, we are required, we have notice requirements. This particular resolution defines them a little bit more about how we're going to handle those. And 2 consecutive weeks at a minimum publishing out, but we give a much longer ample time for that.
We just gone through that experience with Tetra. Did it appear to be enough time?
Yeah.
Now, remember, the hearing for Tetra was just on the question, whether the wording of the question was clear, and whether, this is the most interesting part, and I do want to take an opportunity to comment on the hearing portion of that. The hearing was on the wording of the question and the wording in the fact sheet. Period. Okay? It wasn't about whether information was out long enough in terms of the contract, right? Or the letter of intent or the appraisals. It was the hearing, technically, was just on the question and the fact sheet.
Nobody out there in Citizen Beach would have thought that, though. I mean, they would not have made that slight distinction.
They didn't, even though we did attempt to make it as clear as possible. That it's an interesting opportunity for future referendum to make sure that the public understands that the hearing is on the question and the information in the fact sheet, not whether or not we should do something, although we're going to get that anyway, right? That they were giving us their vote ahead of time. Gee, you're rushing, you're going too fast. And it was a decision of the board whether or not we were moving too fast. And I took my lead from the board. We presented all of the information. Here's the referendum schedule. Are we comfortable with it? The board had a unanimous vote. Yes, we're comfortable. Move ahead. Let's go.
That was a tough one.
It was a tough one. It was.
Well, we were also constrained, the board was also constrained from the back end on dates that it had no control over. So there was a compressed schedule that was just because it was. Some other things may not have quite those limits that we had no control over.
Right. And every time we do something, there's always a learning opportunity and a way to tweak it and do it differently. Comstock is a perfect example. Do we have to hold 2 public hearings? No. But I thought, when that came, I thought, nope, Ken and I and the senior leadership team will build in time just in case. Let's give plenty of opportunity for people to understand the scenario. Because it's complicated, right?
Well, it's complicated, and what I sense is that there just appears to be a lot of distrust. And if you give ample time, you can allow everyone to have a voice, and then the board can take a reasoned decision on what they heard. If you try to accelerate things and shut folks down, then I think that just generates more ill will.
And a good example of the opposite, Julie, as Ken and Ellen and Mike are aware, is with the Lake Ann land swap. This board stopped and built in additional time because of the comments that were coming in. They were like, you know what? Wait a minute. Let's not rush. The project can wait, the developer can wait. It was more than the developer, it was the county as well, because that was a partner as well in this. Everybody can wait just a minute while we make sure we give ample time for public comment before the board signed the memorandum of understanding for that land swap. So it is, there are always circumstances that the board is going to have to take into consideration on timing on that.
You mentioned senior leadership. So just to be clear, for any who might wish to listen.
Right.
So there would be times when you would meet with whomever is the senior leadership, which I asked you to define, on things that are not necessarily brought before the full board until a meeting.
So senior leadership would just be me and my team of directors. All we're going to do is advance something to the board to decide on. I don't have the authority, unless granted to me by the board, to make a decision on something. The schedule for air conditioning unit referendum, the Tetra.
So when you were referring to senior leadership,
just
you meant
staff.
of the staff,
Right.
of the RA staff.
Right. But always advance a suggested schedule. I've learned over time that to make your meetings more effective, I like to at least try and put something before you. Right. And I have no pride, nor does the team. We just try to provide the best guidance possible. But I've gotten a lot of great guidance from the board of, well, have you thought about this? Or we need to add time, we need to do that. So with the Tetra in particular, the schedule was fully discussed. And the board was, the board, when they decided, was comfortable with it.
On Tetra, you can analyze it, you can beat yourself up, you can pat yourself on the back, you do whatever you want to do. I don't think the process would have really mattered much, because the way I saw it early on, and I think it was confirmed as time went on, that you had a very well-organized opposition that was determined to make a statement that had nothing to do with the land acquisition about Tetra. In fact, many of the people, you would think that they should be on the other side of it with all their proclamations of open space and all this other nonsense, because they didn't stand up to it. But they were determined, whether it was to embarrass you, whether it was to embarrass the board, they wanted to have a big defeat. Or whether it meant that they wanted to be a shadow government, or whether they want to be power brokers. That was more of an individual or small group statement. And it was easy to twist the facts, it was easy to present things in sound bites and all of that, and it's easy for the person who knows that you have to disclose all your information to them and not vice versa. So they had most of the cards.
Ray, welcome to the board.
But this seems to be a little more extreme than other things I've seen. So you could beat yourself up over process, and we could have done this, we could have done that. I think you probably did about everything you could have possibly done. And it was going to go that way regardless. We won it anyway. I think a lot of people rallied behind you, and a lot of people who the other side may have counted on to either be silent or with them stayed with their own internal position on the issue rather than their own allegiance to a group of people, which turned out to be a necessary and key factor in the whole thing. And I'm glad we have people like that out there. I think we've probably got 9 people like that here. You know, we'll find out over time, but you know, there's going to be split votes. And we can't let arguments get personal. And if I disagree with somebody on a major issue here, before we even go in to start with on any of these things, we have to be sure that all 9 people, aspirationally, as you like to say, are on the same page. Now, you may take a completely different prescription to what the problem is that I take, but but that's what it is. It's a difference of opinion on how do we get to the same pinnacle that we're both trying to reach. And if we don't have that discussion, if it's not active underneath, you get into just some kind of groupthink mentality, and bingo, everybody agrees with everybody else, and before you know it, we're not seeing a lot of stuff that's going on out there, like many boards. The effect that one person who's writing an analysis on Tall Oaks had was a good thing. You have people open-minded enough to say, you know, I'm already kind of a little bit on the fence on this anyway, but this makes sense, and it's presented in the right way. There's no personal agenda here, and so what did it cost us to push the decision back? Nothing. So we all decided to do that. There was no objection to it.
And that is, you guys have operated over the past couple of months. It's like the dream board. You know, it's, you know, I like the dynamic. Hearings. Whew, we've got several more to go. Sorry.
We put that on governance.
Yeah. Right.
Before any issue comes up, we need a unanimous opinion aspirationally on where we're going with something.
Yeah.
The goal is the same for everybody. I don't care if one guy's on this side and this guy's on the other side of the issue as far as the practitioner part of it.
Right.
But where we're trying to get is the same place.
Right. And then it's all of the benefit of all of the minds around the table.
Right.
How do we get there?
Right.
Because everybody's got something to contribute. You're right. And it just makes the, you know, how, you know, the end result better.
Absolutely.
Okay. Moving on. The other, forgive me, I'm going to move on to the next slide.
Yeah, absolutely.
Board communication with members. This resolution was born many, many years ago, again, because of legislative action in the Commonwealth, the General Assembly, where there are some community associations in the Commonwealth whose boards were not communicating with their members. So a rule was put in place to put mechanisms in place so that members could find out what was going on in the organization, as well as provide an opportunity for members to communicate with each other. So this resolution identifies all of the different methods that we have put in place over time to push information out and pull information back in and give members the opportunity to talk with each other. I have to say, I think that one of the richest things that we can do is member engagement, and it's the person-to-person. And I would say over the past couple of years, we've really gotten more and more into that. More into listening, more into the one-on-one personal. Social media has done a lot for us as well, in a negative and positive sense. But we're really working hard to get kind of information and message out. And Sabrina and I, as well as my senior leadership team, pay very close attention to the comments that come back, because we'll find nuggets that might be missing, or ooh, we need to add something to that, and we comment that. We have big bull sessions at senior leadership team, and I say, okay, oop, we forgot that. We're going to need to make sure we address X, Y, and Z. Or hey, good, we hit it on the mark. So sometimes, even though it's, you know, we're responding back in a different way. But we have a rule on how we do that. I think YouTube has benefited us a lot. I know our viewership on YouTube is like, you know, 500, 600, 700 views sometimes. It's amazing.
Yes.
It's great to see that. People are watching what we're doing. I love it. I know, it's amazing.
I know.
It's good.
They even text message you while the meeting's going.
Exactly. They watch it from Let's see if I just turn one of them back in.
So you're off camera.
Yeah, good? Okay. 5, board staff relationship. I got my master's in public administration at George Mason University. One of my first professors said, governing body set policy, staff implements policy. Don't forget it. That is my mantra. I implement the policies that you that you set. I try to work with you, so does my staff, in developing the policy, but once it's set, that's what we follow. And those are the guidelines. I've heard people use the term guide rails that I operate under. But I'm not the one who's going to set it. Internally, I've got internal policies and things like that for how staff interact with each other and things like that. But even that is dictated in a policy handbook that you approve. And the reason for that is so that if we get into any trouble, this gentleman and his staff can defend us and say, no, there's a set policy here. She was implementing the policy, and the policy was followed. So I am very adamant about that. I only do that with which I am allowed, either spelled out in the governing documents or by resolution or in policy resolutions. My preference is I've got some phenomenal subject matter experts on my staff. My preference is that if you've got a question, let me know about it, and I guarantee you, if I do not know the answer, I am going to grab the individuals who do, and they will chime in and help out. I think some of you have already experienced that. I know, Julie, we've already done that. A couple, and the only reason is, sometimes, we mentioned this the last time briefly when we were together, I've had situations in the past where I've had a board director go and grab somebody, take them off of something, some project, and go work on something else, and I hear about it later. And the individual gets waylaid. But if I know what's going on, there are occasions where I will hear about something, and I've heard it before, and I need to fix something. There's something broken internally. And if I know, then I can help. If you go directly to a staff member, or something good is happening and you want to tell me about it too, I want to make sure that that staff member gets appropriately praised, because we do have an internal system to make sure that staff get rewarded for great, outstanding work. But if I don't know about it, then something's going to fester and it's going to get ugly and worse. And as much as I am supposed to be paying attention to what's going on out there, I pay a lot of attention to what goes on internally. Ken, Ellen, and Mike are very aware of that.
Yeah. And I think
it's like, I don't want to know everything that's going on internally, as does Ken. I spend a lot of time on internal operations and issues, and especially now that I've got two new. It was interesting, we were a senior leadership team meeting last week that was about 4 hours long, budget preparation. I have 7 on my senior leadership team. 5 are brand new, they've never done an RA budget before. I'm spending a lot of time teaching on that, so, yes ma'am.
And I think it's unfair to the staff to put them in such an uncomfortable position, because number one, they find it very uncomfortable to say no to a director.
Right.
Yeah, and we should not ever put staff in that uncomfortable position.
Or they want them to say no. They want to say no to you, but I want them to say yes. That's the difference too. Is sometimes I'll see something and I'm like, absolutely right.
Yeah.
But I got a staff person who says no, and I'm like,
Right.
No, we should have said yes to that.
The other piece of this, of course, from a board perspective, Kate is our counterpart on the staff side.
Absolutely.
And so anything we want accomplished has to go through
Right.
Kate. And it's really up to Kate to figure out how to make that happen.
To move it forward.
And I try to be as responsive as I can, either getting back to you that day or promising to get back to you by a certain time, whatever the case might be. But
There are also other times when it will have to come back to the board for a decision.
Absolutely.
So,
I might get asked a question that I don't feel comfortable making a decision or answer on, and I'm going to push it back to you all to say, is this what you want to do? Or is this a policy you want to put in place or whatever? It's not solely for me to say yes or no to.
In this case, from isolating yourself inadvertently from a lot of the bigger picture things and connections that you need to make, because there's so much happening on the outside that requires a CEO to know about, to be able to interrelate with people and all of that. And I'm not saying it's happening or anything, but just a possibility in the future that you get so involved with the internal operational issues that there just isn't enough time and focus. Things can happen around us that we don't like, that we need to nip in the bud.
What I have learned in the past couple of years is that if you have good people on your senior leadership team that you can delegate to, then I've got free time to go and do all kinds of stuff. And I do have a phenomenal group. There are things that I can just set it and forget it and walk away and get an update. It's having all of them stay, in place and not get stolen from you or have to deal with family matters. I mean, I'm pleased that the two individuals who recently left, it wasn't because things like this, so to speak. It was just outside circumstances. But my goal is in the next 6 to 9 months to be able to say, you got your, that's why I set goals, departmental goals, those 12 to 36 months. You know what I want you to do? I've got to go take care of business out there. I built an entire team for that, and in the short time, and I Ken have been on the team for as long as he has been, prior to me even being CEO. I mean, he's been through me and Milton. It's we got a great team, and they're doing a good job.
I think it reflects in the scope and the focus of the CEO, where it's been and where it is now, because there is a lot more involvement out in the community, so that the focus has shifted more to looking what's going on around, being aware, but also maintaining, obviously, the relationship with the staff as well.
Yeah, I mean, these are things you watch the business shows. All corporations run into this when there's a switch in the CEO, or there's a big investor comes in and wants to put some of his own people on the board seat because they're unhappy with what's going on, and yada, yada, yada. And these are the kinds of things that you hear debated in industry all the time. Is this CEO too focused? He came from an accounting background or whatever it happens to be. Or is this CEO too marketing oriented and he's totally clueless on what's going on? So you hear this all the time. And I don't know, you only have a certain number of hours in a week to devote to something.
Absolutely.
And,
absolutely.
So I just curious how people deal with these things, come in and out.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of that is the board's perspective as well. And if there are things that you see that you feel a different direction needs to be taken, then that's something that's discussed at the board. And as staff implements the policies of the board, those are things that get passed on.
Yes, ma'am.
May I answer this piece for you as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Kate is very wired to the external community through her many relationships with leaders in our community as well as many organizations. I've always been very, very impressed with her, how she's able to handle the internal as well as the external. She is a great time manager.
Would you agree with that, Sabrina?
Yeah.
Hey, she's
painful, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a lot. It does it. Yeah.
I know. Nobody having fun.
No, that's something I've asked her. How do you simultaneously stay so aware of this level down here, where I'm asking her a formatting question, like, do you want this left justified or right justified on a document, and really high level issues. And
It's really tough. It is.
Yeah.
It is. And
Great time manager.
when I'm like, psh. But it is. But I I feel that you have a great team in place, and from the stuff that we're doing internally right now to advance the organization, the energy and the flow is so positive right now that I can't wait to see where they take it. You know, I mean, because they've got the tools that they need, or they're getting the tools that they need to advance. But my attention is definitely focused, as Ellen said, outside. I mean, I'm constantly what's going on, and how can we be involved? How can we advance ourselves in a different way than we ever have before?
That's why it's so important on the board that we focus on the big issues, the big important issues, and clear time off the agenda so that we can have good discussions like we had at the last board meeting. You know, that's the way we're going to move the agenda forward.
Right. Right, exactly. So, you know how to reach me. I don't even have to give you guys this information anymore. My cell phone is up there. I do respond to it. Email, you know that I look at that, and I respond to that as well. You know that if I hear of something going on in the community on a weekend or something like that, you're going to be alerted to it. Situation that happened over Memorial Weekend, I'm going to make sure you know what's going on. Or if you hear of something, Ken and Ellen, gosh, it was middle of May when we're trying to get North Shore Pool ready. Water was left on a little bit too long and was flowing over the pool and onto the pathway. Alerted me right away, and Ken happened to know who else needed to be alerted, so he took the privilege of not only telling me, but also sending a message out to our maintenance staff so that we could go and shut the water off.
That's good.
No, and not just, it's this, you know, but I can't, we don't know about it, you know, can't fix it if we don't know what's going on that. But don't hesitate to contact me. Texting, I'm good at responding to that too, so no worries there. Okay, conflict of interest and policy statement. You all have turned in, all the board directors turned in. You can expect a call from the teacher because he's got some additional information that he needs from all board directors. I don't think anybody was left out.
Just a couple, it's minor and it's more informational than it is substantive.
Right. Something that we learned last year, a couple of our not board members, but members in the community noticed that some of our conflict forms were not perfect. And I appreciated that, and they said, who's double checking this stuff? And Ken and I looked at each other and said, boy, did we let that slip through the crack. So he and I are being very diligent about that, making sure that they're fully vetted, because they do go up on the website for people.
So they haven't gone up yet?
No, not yet. We've got them all. Ken looked at them recently, and he is getting ready to just make some calls. And the reason why he's calling you is sometimes your questions are so technical in the legal aspect that I don't want to take a guess. I'd rather have my expert do it.
Well, I think that's a good plan on this one. So we will have an opportunity
to correct before they go up.
See what will be put on the website.
Absolutely.
I don't know that, not that I'm hiding anything, but I don't know if I responded in a manner that I'm ready for it to be public.
You got it. Talk with this guy about that. He'll walk you through that.
I didn't put my account numbers or anything.
That's good.
But, you know.
You should have.
Yeah, but your social security number was on there.
Right.
Yeah.
Date of birth, all that. So he will talk to you about that.
Maiden name, birth, place, yeah, all the common ones.
All your personal codes.
Right. Is there anything you wanted to talk with them about when it comes to conflict?
The biggest thing about conflict is to disclose. If you disclose, you're going to be more than protected, and it'll be better for you. So if you're concerned about anything, you know, if you see something coming up on an agenda, touch base with me, call me. If you've got a question, I'll answer it and tell you how to step through it and what you're going to do, because you need to make sure that the rest of the board knows if there is even a potential conflict of interest. Most of the time, it's really not. Most of these conflicts of interest really, the case law is out there that relates to monetary benefits that come as a result of a conflict. And, you know, there are a lot of perceived conflicts that sometimes occur, but it's not a real conflict. So if you've got a concern, call me. Let's talk about it, and I'll be glad to set you straight. My general advice is going to be just disclose. Put it out there on the table, make sure it gets in the minutes, and you'll be fine.
Okay. Rule for issue introduction. Many, many moons ago, we were caught off guard at board meetings, especially during budget, when a board director would come the night that a budget was supposed to be approved and an assessment set with a large ticket item. Let's put $100,000 in, which would impact that assessment up or down, and without any time for staff to react, to respond, or the board to respond. So a rule was put in place so that if a director has an issue or an idea, it's not an emergency situation, but hey, you know, I'd like to do X. Ken brought up something a couple of weeks ago about TED Talks. And us having a TED Talk in Reston and helping with that. And he said, hey, I'd like to get on the next board operating committee agenda, July the 6th, right, to talk about that and see what we can do about it, which is great, because that way, you know, we've got time to react, we've got something that we can look, does it have to go to the full board, are we okay, is it vetting, whatever the case might be. Hey, I want to put a new resolution in place to allow us to paint all the trash cans purple in Reston or something like that, because, you know, college season's coming up and we want to make sure everybody knows that TCU Horned Frogs rock.
Good idea.
Right, exactly. That kind of thing.
That's when I turn to you, Ray, and say, I think there may be a conflict of interest. I may want to disclose it.
So,
Julie's got a purple on top.
I know.
She's with the program.
I know. Yeah, there you go. So try to advance it to the board operations committee. We have had board directors come sit before the committee and say, here's what I want to do. Not a problem. That way it appropriately gets placed on a future board agenda. Maybe it's that month, maybe it's in a future month. You have an exchange of ideas. There might be another director or a group that you want to bring into it. But it just helps manage the agenda. Because as you can see, we got a lot going on that. There have been times when an emergency situation has come up, and you may see Sabrina and I will send out you the board packet and the agenda set, but something literally will come up over the weekend or on a Monday, and we're like, you know what, we got the opportunity to get that before the board, so we're going to amend that agenda and resend out the whole packet with the additional item. Here's the key. One of the first things that the board president does is you adopt the agenda of the meeting. Is everybody comfortable, you know, with what's on this agenda? So even though the board operating committee or me, I could add something, it's up to the board as to whether or not you want to take up those items.
Because it might be, because through the board operating, we set the meeting agenda, and then something comes up and we can put it in there, but we have to agree.
Right.
That we wish to go beyond 10 o'clock.
And even though the board operating committee sets the agenda, it still has to be approved by the board of directors.
Right.
Yeah, and the board operating committee is basically directing traffic. You know, I mean, it's like, okay, yep, that's the best place there. No, let's move it another year. No, it needs, or move it another time. New board member orientation, it's happening right now. Should have happened within 30 days of the time you were elected. We got part of it done, so I kind of feel like we kind of fulfilled part of that. But we also needed to make sure that we got everybody as many people as we could in the room, especially our 2 newest members was most important. We decided to include all of the board in it. Ken and I have already said we need to have a longer time session for it, so we'll work with the board operating committee to come up with the best plan for orientation next time around and things to cover. So as the 3 of you are sitting here listening to this, some of the people on my board governance committee, governance committee, think about tweaks, length of time, how we want to hold this, when we do it again in the month of April, in April 2016.
Kate, may I ask a question? I think there are a couple of board members who are not here who have not gone through the orientation.
Technically, everybody has.
Have they all gone through?
Everybody has.
Fine. I withdraw my question.
But no, that's okay. No, it's what we've done in the past is Ken and I, and typically the board president, if the board president has kind of been renewed, have sat down with the brand new directors only. We didn't ask all the other directors to come. Ken and I thought it would be a good idea to make sure that the full board has the benefit of the orientation, because sometimes we forget things. And what Ken and I learned through the good Ken is the benefit of having somebody who's been through it to help answer their peers' questions, the new director's questions. Hey, I'm a director too. Here's what I've experienced. So we thought it would be best to have everybody in the room at the same time. You've already started exchanging ideas and concepts with each other, so it's a benefit. So it's not a bunch of newbies, it's everybody together. Annual board planning session. So typically in the month of April, and I might change the timing on this so we're not wedded to a particular month, maybe we do it annually and the board picks the best time to do it. Because we did it much earlier this year than we have, and we're actually having kind of another session coming up on the 22nd. January to March, the board had a planning session that included more people than just the board, and that was to put together the new strategic plan. Next year, and I'm going to back up, and we're even doing something brand new that we've not done before. We have asked members what they're interested in, what their focus is for us in the next budget cycle. So you're almost getting a flavor for what they want us to focus in on by kind of, okay, we want to focus on leading sustainable change. So any new initiatives that we take up, or our focus is going to be on that. So Kate and team, that's what we want you to do, and here's a specific action we want you to take. So on the 22nd, we got a whole bunch of member input and staff input, as well as committee input, and you'll be providing direction. What do we plan to do from a financial standpoint, right? And maybe some actions that we want to undertake. But it wouldn't hurt for the board to take a look at the strategic plan on an annual basis and say, what do we want our priorities to be for the next 12 months? The governance committee is working on just a board, work plan that I'm going to share with you guys in a few minutes. That they're going to come back to the board with just not only this is what we want to do in the next 12 months, but we want to try and accomplish in the next 36 months. So for the first time, I believe, in a long time, Ken started it about 2 years ago. We're looking at the strategic planning, identifying priorities. But now we're doing even more planning than we have before. The board, there's a lot of input. Here's the direction. Here's what we want to do. So one of the important things is annually we try to set board priorities. Board understands what's coming up in the coming year. Coming year is odd for the board because it's not a calendar year. It's typically April to March of the next year. But you all determine how, what do you want your focus to be on, what's important to you. And I try and impart on you, which will be one of the last slides I have tonight, as to what I see is coming up in the next year that we need to focus on. Some of the stuff you know, but I'll say, hey, this is on the horizon that we need to pay attention to. Records of membership in board meetings. So, Eve is the secretary, Sabrina's the assistant secretary. Sabrina, ultimately, no pressure at all, is responsible for the records of the association. Board meeting minutes, policy resolutions that are adopted, putting notice of meetings out, things like that. You didn't realize it's already part of your job, so you shouldn't have to think about it. We pretty much keep all of our records on the website. All of our meeting minutes, all of the agenda packets, all of the policy resolutions are up for everyone to get a hold of. We've moved away from paper. She's got a whole lovely shelf of old meeting minutes that date back to 1964 for the Reston Association. But job of the secretary is to hold those documents. So we have to keep them here at the association. Board meeting minutes. I learned a long time ago, it is not who said what, but what actions are taken. It was amazing to me when I took the role of assistant secretary about 11 years ago, how long the minutes were. And it was right before Ken's arrival. I was working with another legal counsel at the time. 20 pages.
Wow.
And I was like, I'd go back and I'd listen, I'd get every word. And before he was brought on, he said, why are you doing that? Because in a court of law, and I learned through my training with Community Associations Institute, the judge is interested in what action the board took. He said, take action minutes. That's fine. They're as short as they are. That's why we focus on motions. That's why, we're not taking word for word down. You'll see her stop until she heard somebody say, I make a motion to, then she's there this way. You'll also see that we try and give a suggestion of a motion when you get your packets. That doesn't mean you have to use that mode. You can change it any way you want. It's a suggestion. And I'll be very frank, I did that many years ago because I was really having a hard time following things that people were making up on the fly. And I'm like, oh, this is confusing. So I'd rather kind of give a hint and we'll edit. It's meant taking a little easier too. But it's a suggestion and it can be changed. It's up to the board. It's up to the board. And we get a sense of it. And actually the board operating committee is helping, operations committee is helping craft those motions as well. Here's the action that, yes, it's ready to go. And here's what it is. So Julian is beginning to see that Mike and Ken are familiar with that too. So just kind of being vetted ahead of time.
The one, I guess it was the last board meeting, though, there was a motion kind of on the fly. And I did get some comments after from members who were watching YouTube saying, what did you guys really vote on? What was the wording? Because it was the aspirational one.
Right.
But it kind of got a little bit, what I thought the words weren't exactly what they were. Not that I would have changed my vote, but I do think that it would behoove us to have it clearly stated for the record before we vote on it, whether it's, that Sabrina tells us what she's captured as the vote.
If it's not before you in writing like that.
And if there's ever a time where you have any sort of confusion as to what the actual motion is, ask. That's critical to everybody.
Right.
So if any, ask it to be read out of the...
And I thought that night it had been asked to be reread, and it was, but I still think it was confusing.
That was the call outs,
Yeah, and that is okay to say, I still, we want to do that one more time, or there's a word missing. And what you will see sometimes, sometimes, we'll go into an executive session, the board has gotten a sense of something, and everybody will adjourn, and you'll see Ken and I, trying to craft to make sure we captured the sense, so that when you come back into open session, and I will push that out and you'll hear bing, 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 bing all over everybody's computers, right? So that you can see it, and it's comfortable, and Sabrina's got it, and it's not like, what did so-and-so say? Yeah.
But you can question the minutes even up to the board meeting. That's when she has a motion to approve the minutes if you still have concern.
Yeah, and Julie did a great job. She found something that needed to happen last month, which really appreciate. And thank you for reading your packet.
Yes.
Yeah, important, very important, yeah.
Yeah.
Rule number 1 for our director. Read your materials.
Read the materials.
Be prepared.
Yeah. But action minutes is the bottom line. Who was there and who on the board was voting was there. When did you get up and leave? So you'll see Sabrina, sometimes like, somebody, what time was it? What time did they get up? What time did you come back? I mean, even if you went out, sneezed, came back in the room, we're going to record that.
Absolutely.
Because if something happens.
bio break.
Right, and the intent of that is if a vote is taken when you're out of the room, we're going to record who voted and who didn't. Because sometimes it's matter on that. And we're also keeping a head count.
Right.
Do we have the 5 of 9? If somebody gets up and we're about ready to take a vote, we have to have quorum. We have 5, and that's it. Somebody gets up, leaves the room, boop, got to stop everything. Can't take a vote. Got to wait till that person comes back in the room. Or if they don't come back in the room, the meeting's done. No more business can be conducted. I mentioned this earlier. You know where to find all of the board meeting minutes. They're on the website under the governance section, under board of directors, board meeting agenda packets, all right there. We have archive files as well. How far did we go back?
2001. But if you want any earlier than that, just ask it.
Yeah.
I'll provide you a hard copy.
Yeah. So it's there for everybody to see. YouTube, no, not at least, that last year was the first year we did YouTube, but at least the minutes are there. And we're now archiving all of this so somebody can go back and look.
Are they searchable?
Our new search, the little like mustard colored square in the upper right hand corner.
Yeah.
The new search engine, and it is so good.
Really?
Especially compared to the one.
So I attended the sustainability working group, and if I wanted to know when they met, with the board or with board operations committee, I'd be able to sort that out there.
I mean, if it were in the minutes, if it were in the minutes.
Yeah, well, they're going to be before the board planning committee.
Yeah.
Would have been part of.
I think
okay, good.
It can even go down. It definitely does content of a page. I don't know if it's strong enough to search the content of a PDF that's linked on the page. Do you know what I'm saying?
Ooh, because they're all PDF files.
Maybe. I would have to ask our media manager, or our web manager if it should be. I can just test it.
Test? Yeah, she'll test it.
Carry on.
She'll test it.
Before you
We'll get the
test,
answer.
just a question, is there an equivalent ketchup-colored?
No,
But
that was
why
a
not?
good description of the color. It's mustard.
I'll get you a hamburger to go with that.
It's not French's, it's Dijon.
That's right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Shake my hand. Spokesperson. So we also have a rule on spokespersons. If we have a rule, there's a reason. Obviously, and you've heard me say this a number of times tonight, somewhere along the line something happened and we had to create a rule. It goes back to what Ken was talking about earlier about the association's position on things after a vote was taken.
And credibility.
And credibility. So this was set up so that myself, board president, and Mike Leone, who I can't wait to introduce you guys to later this month, my communications director of communications, community engagement, speaks on behalf of the association. If an opinion is asked, it should come to one of the three of us. I can't tell you how many times I will get a question and I will, fortunately, email. A lot of the reporters now like to try and, if they get you by email, I have the opportunity to pause and go, Mike, or Larry, or whoever the subject matter expert is, and craft the message mentally, walk through, make sure I've got all my ducks in a row and respond. Ellen, Ken, he knows. Hey, I got a Washington Post reporter that just called. Want to let you know that. When do you have time available to do X, Y, and Z? I mean, you could speak to it. You've done it for 3 years. Ellen is now doing it on that. But we are very quick that if there is somebody on the board who's a subject matter expert on it, we will say, Mike, got to call on sustainability or got to call on, whatever. I need you to help.
Absolutely.
Help me with this response because I don't know what to say. Just send a reporter your way on that. What are you? We're on camera. Okay, just saying.
So, I have a joke going on over there.
Oh, there must be.
Must be the deer.
Must be the
deer.
Pickleball.
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 We would have to get a subject matter expert. Jeff Comment. He could help us with that.
That's right. There you go.
So if you get a call, say, hey, can I call you right back? Let me, Ellen, and definitely you want to let Ellen know, but me and Mike Leone know, so that we can let you know, oh, XYZ is coming, so be prepared for this question. Or, hey, no, great, have at it. And oh, by the way, when you're talking to them, mention this as well, which we've done before. Here's a link that you can send to them on this, or have them post this, or whatever. So that's how we operate on that. Anything to add, sir?
I think the last bullet point is very important.
Would you like to
Which
tell
is
them that?
in essence, if there's no position taken by the board, it's important to clearly indicate that if you're the spokesperson. Because the board hasn't taken a position on it, the board still is open to questions, and it may turn out to be entirely different than what your perspective or your comments are related to. So just realize that ultimately it's the board that's going to be making a decision on a position that has not been taken yet, and that will be when it becomes an official position, and that no official position is taken until that time.
On the 15th of April, when I was coming out of the Board of Zoning Appeals decision, I was faced, as Ellen knows,
Yeah.
nice bright light, microphone in my face. What do you think? And I said, no comment. That reporter was really disappointed. Well, so-and-so said blah, blah. Aren't you with? Yes. And no comment. Well, what did they decide? I said, they decided 1, 2, 3. How do you feel about that? No comment. Disappointed, flipped the light off, walked away, angry. Because it wasn't, there was no opinion that had been formed yet. We waited for that. We worked on that together, right?
Yep.
And then it was published out.
Absolutely.
So I'm very, what?
I would just say that there was no position taken.
Yes, sir, no position.
Because the worst thing that can happen oftentimes is when a reporter does exactly what they did, for you to offer an opinion.
Right.
Position is one thing. You can offer a position. This is the
Right.
position of the board. This is the position of the association. But you offer an opinion, and that gets you into trouble.
Yes.
And to be honest with you, from a lawyer's perspective,
Have you been dishonest this whole time?
I have been.
Okay.
My complete comment would be no comment for the most part.
And then walk away.
Anytime that
Yes.
you're asked a question in that immediacy of the situation, because you haven't given any thought, you haven't composed yourself. There are all sorts of rules and regulations for that, and just be careful about the worst. And I've seen it happen one time before, and it was on an unbelievable issue that had to do with an association trapping beaver in their lake in order to remove the beavers. And the way they were doing it was underwater traps, which meant that the beavers drowned. And the comments that were quoted by the board president in the article itself basically raised the hackles on every animal protection group there was in the Commonwealth of Virginia and elsewhere. And it caused a big stir within the community to the point where the president was thinking about resigning because he was so embarrassed by, and realized that you may quote things and you may say things, But many times, what you say doesn't end up in quotes in the paper. So that's why when she said no comment, that oftentimes is best before you get the written stuff out.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We spend a lot of time internally, putting together press releases, because we really do want to get in front of it. We want to be the ones pushing out the information. I have to say, more recently, over the past several months, we've been really good about getting the message out before anybody else does. But it is fascinating to me how a reporter will ask a question, you will answer it, and how it is dialed and twisted just a little bit. It's a recent example, but I will hold off on commenting on that. No comment on that. Okay. Record retention policy and destruction policy. This came up in our board source conversation. Interestingly enough, when, I don't want to give away too much on board source, but we went through a process back in May 2014. One of the things that we learned, we didn't have a written policy on record retention and destruction. So last year, this policy was put into place. And what I wanted to do, because it's referenced on these bullet points, is make sure that you had a copy of the documents that we retained. And it is part of this policy that's up here, but because I'm going to reference it, I'm going to kind of read through this one because it's a little bit more complicated, but it's an important one. I wanted to make sure you had a copy of kind of the chart of the different types of records we have and what the policy is on retention. So books and records are retained for time periods listed in the retention chart. That's why I put that before you. The board is using its best judgment to determine the retention period for any record not expressly retained in the chart. And we tried very hard to make sure we were as inclusive as could be. Regardless of the retention period specified in the event of litigation against the association, if it's threatened or filed, the RA is to use its best efforts to preserve any books or records that might reasonably be related to the threatened or filed litigation. Very important to this gentleman, as well as any other counsel that we have, as John, or if we have to go to a matter that's going to involve our insurance company identifying counsel, they're going to say the same thing. So we're very careful with our records on that. Any books and records that are discarded in accordance with the policy will be shredded, permanently deleted if in electronic format, or otherwise destroyed if they contain financial information, contact information for individuals, or other confidential matters, including but not limited to types of documents that can be withheld from inspection pursuant to the Virginia Property Owners Association Act. After being disposed, electronic storage devices containing association books and records shall be erased and physically destroyed. I think one of the things that we learned the best way to do is drill a hole in it, right? And just really right through the drive. Yeah, to do that. Except as otherwise instructed by the board, I'm authorized to have books and records discarded or destroyed in accordance with this retention policy. Again, I'm not going to do anything unless I'm allowed to per this policy, any of the policies. If a specific record or file is not listed in the chart, or there's any question whether it should be destroyed, then I'm going to get written authorization from you all to do that. Important to have, good guide for our staff, especially now that we're doing the new document management project. There are files that we have that were not on site that are kept over at another facility, central services facility, that we're like, do we need this? Well, how long do we need to keep it? Here's the record policy on that, so that helps. So that was a new policy that was added to your section, and it's the last one that I had to go over with you tonight. So those are all kind of the board rules for your operation and the administration of the association. There are other sets of rules having to do with common areas, having to do with committees, having to do with the design review board, that also have their own sets of resolutions. Land use policies that we just started last year as to how we operate there. That is another one that's coming up. I'm going to have you, Madam President, if you will allow me, a motion that I'd love for her to make on June the 25th is, would you turn this into a policy resolution? You know, that.
So where would that go if it was
Under the
such a
land
thing?
use section, under our land use section. And if you look under governing documents, if you look on the website,
Where I am.
under,
Dropbox.
or that's in Dropbox too, right? All of the
That-
resolutions are in Dropbox.
Yes, and
Yeah.
yes.
Yep.
I didn't find them there, but I found them on the website, all the resolutions. So this would fall in common area resolutions?
That one is going to fall under land use. That one has not been created yet.
Well, I
There is a
realize
land
that, but
use
I wanted to
section.
read what
Yeah.
land use resolution stated today.
Okay. Yep. So that's where I think we would put that.
That
Additions to
wasn't
property
something I
lines.
understood, but that was going to be a policy.
So, important dates and resources overall for the association. Annual members' meetings are always held the second Tuesday in April, and unless there's some kind of holiday, then we might alter that Tuesday. Regular board meetings are held the fourth Thursday of the month at 6 o'clock, except for in August, November, and December. August, we typically give everybody a break and take off. Staff are on vacations, you guys are on vacations, you know, we might be in the middle of doing budgeting, which I can guarantee this year. There's a lot of stuff going on internally for that. Month of November, Thanksgiving holiday is there, so we move it up a week. In December, we've got the winter break, so we're moving it up because a lot of people are going on vacation and things like that. Otherwise, fourth Thursday of the month at 6 o'clock. Board Operations Committee, when that packet goes out, it goes out to the entire board because it has to do with setting the agenda of the board. We want to make sure all board directors know what's going on. You don't have to attend, only the members of that committee have to attend, but at least you know what's going on. That is typically the first Monday of the month at 6 o'clock. Unless there is a holiday, then we're going to move it to probably the following Tuesday, very next day.
Since the board ops took over basic piece of the board planning, and there's now a governance one, should not the agenda for the governance one also be shared with the rest of the board members?
Sure.
Should they wish to?
Sure, we can do that. That's a great idea.
That's a great idea.
As a matter of fact, as a member of the board, you can attend any,
Any of the meetings.
and you should if you're interested.
But she was speaking of the agenda, yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, and the agenda as well.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And we'll
I
definitely
actually
make
don't
that
know
happen.
when they are, but, you know, as part of this first year of fast-track learning,
Sure.
come and
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that's a great idea, Julie. We'll do that. And we have a web page for both of those committees where all of the information. So we already have a board governance committee page up on the website. It has the meeting agenda plus all the meeting materials. And as soon as the minutes are done, those will go up in the next agenda packet, whole 9 yards. So all about open, transparent, here's what we're working on. All about that. So you can point to it. Same thing with Board Operations Committee. It's got its own page. The agenda and full packets are put on there. Went to iPad and Dropbox. Maybe in the future we'll go to Surface Pros and change out what we have available.
Why would you do that?
But I don't know.
yeah, why would
Maybe
you
we'll
do
give
that?
that a choice. I don't know.
Good point. Why would you do that?
I don't know, Ken. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, it's such a great relationship.
Yeah, no laughing. No laughing. Remember that.
No laughing.
Makes a whiny noise. We moved away from publishing paper packets because it was not environmentally considerate and incredibly expensive.
I just read a review of Dropbox versus Box, and Dropbox is the more appropriate for us to use than its competitor Box.
Good.
By the by.
So we're good.
Yeah.
But we find this very useful to put documents in and be able to get to it.
But,
Yeah.
yeah.
But we have all of the information, budget information, governing documents, board packets, committee stuff, all of it.
Information.
Yeah, all of it's available there. And if something's missing, let us know and we'll put it up there. Governing documents, strategic plan, all tools, budget, board meeting calendar, board planning. Ooh, isn't that funny? I missed that BPC and changed to BOC. Forgot that. But all of that, information is important when you're making decisions. You guys all have access to it, which is great. Board source, evaluation. So we mentioned a couple of times earlier this evening about kind of changing the way we do things, the animosity with the board. Ken, back in 2013, we got to do something about this. We need help. We're not coordinating as well as we could with each other. And I said, I got a plan for that. I got an idea, Board Source, because I had worked with them before in my volunteer capacity, not for Board Source, but through, with other organizations that use Board Source. So we called them up and said, we'd like some advice, we'd like some direction. Facilitator had the board of directors do an evaluation. How are we doing? Very lengthy evaluation. It was electronic, several pages long. And the end result of that was this document. Board self-assessment results, and kind of here's the executive summary of what you need to do. That is in your Dropbox tonight, so you've got a copy of that. You can look through what the results were as of May 2014. He didn't just send this to us and say good luck. We had a session on the 3rd of May on 2014, where the board and the senior leadership team came together to find out, to talk a little bit more about the results and identify together what we needed to do. Governance Committee has already seen this document. This was the end result. I think, Julie, do you have a copy of it?
It's in there.
Yeah. And it was a really great exercise to find out kind of some easy, key, and more complicated things that we needed to do as a corporate board to put in place. Great way to say, hey, we've got some check boxes that are missing that we need to do. The governance committee is in the process of prioritizing these, of course, right now. And we'll be coming back to the board with here's what we should tackle first. But there are some things that have been accomplished since 2015 or 2014 when it came out. Some stuff was as simple as changing the way we did our board agendas. All of the items that are at the top of the page used to be separate items that we would stop, take a vote, stop, have a conversation, take a vote on. And Board Source said, identify all those items that are administrative in nature, that aren't strategic, get them on a consent calendar, which is up at the top, and only focus on those strategic items. So there's a lot of time and attention now being paid to making sure you're focusing on the high-level stuff. It's important. And although we're not getting out exactly on time, you are focused at a much higher level. You're having the conversation.
Seems like there's been a lot of very important strategic and tactical things happening this year.
Excellent.
So
Yep.
I'm hopeful that we will
Continue that. Yeah, continue that. So,
and I know the other night we did a lot of said,
Yeah.
no, that can be consent, that can be consent.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Read it
Yeah.
before you get to the board meeting.
Absolutely.
Unless you have an objection, onward.
Right.
Right.
So that we can focus on having the discussions.
And that's
that
advantage of
need
having the
full
BOC.
board.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that session with Board Source was invaluable. it was also invaluable because one of the items on there is that whole concept of a board code of conduct. Because that was really what Ken saw was the crux of the issue. So did Mike over time. It's like we've got some norms that we need to put in place. We need to have a committee, a governance committee that helps, that helps address issues as it comes up. Helps identify how do we deal with board officers, how do we mentor each other, the board, how do we put orientation in place so everybody knows what's going on. So the whole concept of the board governance committee came out of that self-evaluation and the task list. And that task list was not formed by the facilitator, Bruce Leslie, instead, it was formed by the board sitting there on May 2014, and that was the end result, and this is what we had to do. Very, very fruitful on that. So now we're working on implementation. The governance committee is coming up with ideas, and it's going to come up with its work plan to bring back to the full board. And it's really prioritizing all those items on the action list. But what do we want to do when? Is this okay? Does it make sense? Because even though the board governance committee is going to come up with ideas, it's the full board of directors who has to say, yes, that's what we want to do. Code of conduct is probably going to be the biggest one that's going to come up because that's going to require a facilitated conversation, again, by board source, I think, to come in and say, what do you want to have in a code of conduct? So there's going to be a lot more educational interaction, from a company like BoardSource to come in and help us out to be the best corporate board we can be. And it's already made a big difference.
So they would come to the BOC, and then we would vet it.
The governance committee would come to the BOC.
And then we'd go to the full board.
Right,
on their work plan.
As an example for a work plan.
Work plan, yeah.
But I'm confident that the governance committee is going to find issues that require full board. It's like no BOC, we're going to go to the full.
Go directly to the board.
And let's have a full conversation about things, right? Like the concept of officers.
Right.
And how do we handle that? Here's an idea. How do you guys feel about that? So, again, it's a more organized way of doing business.
Doesn't the governance committee, if there's something they want to have on the agenda for the board meeting, don't they need to bring that to the BOC?
Correct.
Say,
yes.
Let's put it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they could say, hey, we need to have a special meeting or a work session just on developing a code of conduct. They could think about it, date and when should we do that kind of thing. And here's our prescribed agenda. Here's the game plan for, we're going to bring in a facilitator. We want to cover these items, and the BOC will be like, okay, that kind of thing, I believe, yes. But the conversation about what the code of conduct would be is not up for the operating committee to decide. That's up to the full board to have a conversation on.
So just like we have each of the committees develop a work plan, the board governance committee is in the process of creating one, and this is a key part of it.
They've already set some dates to things. When I looked at the list for this year, I was like, you got to talk some more.
I figured so much.
So I was like, woo, look what we figured to get it all done. But that was a great process, and I'm sure it'll happen again. One of the recommendations from board sources every couple of years, kind of self-evaluate. Are you where you want to be as a board, as an organization? And I'm pretty confident. I think board governance committee's already said, hey, it would be a good idea if we did this self-assessment again in March. To see where we are, see how we're doing. And the beauty of doing it, again, is that you get to see where you improved, or what's missing still. What do we still need to hone in on?